All right, hey everybody, welcome back to Real Estate Bites. This is episode number 61. Every week we come at you on Fridays at the lunch hour, bringing you a little bit of news, information, pull back the curtain on the real estate industry and what real estate professionals do behind that curtain. This week, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 657. This is the proposed legislation that our presidential candidates talk about when they talk about what they're going to do about affordable housing. Before we jump into that, though, let's take a look at our meme of the week. What a cool way to make new friends. I had another one picked out, but then I saw this and it literally made me laugh out loud. I'm sure this thing's photoshopped and something's, somebody doctored this up, but what a cool new way to make new friends. Yeah, it's that made me chuckle. All right, so let's jump into it, guys. Senate Bill 657. Okay, what is this? So we have two presidential candidates who both talk about how they're going to address affordable housing crisis, the housing shortage in our country. They don't dive too deep into what exactly they're going to do, what plans they have. I did a little digging into it and found that they're both referencing a bill, Senate Bill 657. Pull that up right here. They're both referencing this bill here that was drafted in March of 2023. So, that's the thing. This housing crisis, for lack of a better word, right? Whether you're talking about the shortage or affordability of housing, it's nothing new. It's nothing new at all, to the point that they drafted this bill, as you can see here, on March 6th of 2023. And I got to tell you guys, I think our federal government is only really good at two different things, and that is coercion and destruction. Aside from that, they don't do anything very well at all, and when we start to pull this thing apart a little bit, that's kind of the point I want to make. Like, my favorite candidate would be the one who stands up and says, I promise to pass no new laws. That would be fantastic, because every time they do something, they always say it's to help the underprivileged, the poor. It always hurts the underprivileged and the poor. This bill is no different, okay? As you can see here, this is to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish a tax credit for neighborhood revitalization. And this tax credit piece is of paramount importance when you're reading the rest of this stuff. How are these candidates promising to address the housing shortage and housing affordability with a tax credit? Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll circle back. Let's dive into this a little bit deeper. I'm not going to scroll through the whole thing. There's a lot of legalese in here, a lot of references back to tax codes, but you'll get the general gist of what they're talking about. So, here's one of the things that, this is one of the guiding tenets right here of this document. The housing supply shortage disproportionately impacts low income and distressed communities. They talk a lot about census tracts in this document. They talk a lot about the types of neighborhoods or communities that are eligible to receive these tax credits. They discuss poverty levels. They talk about, this is either for cities that have 50,000 or more people. So locally, we have two communities in Lorain County that meet that criteria. That's Lorain and Elyria. Lorain has about 65,000 people, and Elyria just makes the cut with a population of around 52,000 people. Okay, so cities of 50,000 or more, or they also address rural counties. So these are counties throughout the country that don't have any metropolitan population centers whatsoever. So those are generally, cities with 50,000 or more, or poor rural counties. And then they talk about poverty levels. They talk about census tracts where there's disproportionate number of distressed homes, distressed families. Okay. And so it talks about who's going to oversee this, right? There's going to be an establishment of neighborhood homes credit agencies. These are going to be state-run bureaucracies who are going to review the application processes for the applicants who are looking for these credits to determine whether or not the project is an eligible project for this sort of tax credit. Okay, and it's open to homeowners, single family residences. It's also open to those who own multifamilies up to 4 units, but the owner has to reside there. So, I mean, it all sounds great right now, but let's be honest. When you're talking about a tax credit, that means the money needs to be spent first before the tax credit is going to be realized when you go to file your taxes, right? And so who in these distressed neighborhoods and communities has the money to build a home or do a substantial renovation to the home? Because those are some of the things that are eligible. We can see down here, the term reasonable development costs means amounts paid or incurred for the acquisition of buildings and land, construction, substantial rehabilitation, demolition of structures, or environmental remediation to the extent that the Neighborhood Homes Credit Agency determines that such amounts meet the standards specified. Okay. Who in these neighborhoods has the money to acquire land, build structures, do substantial rehabilitation, which they designate later on, and this is $20,000 or more, demolish structures, do environmental remediation? Who? And I'm not saying, sure, there are going to be some who live in these neighborhoods who have done well by themselves and just decided to stay in the neighborhood they grew up in and will have the money. But you're talking about neighborhoods where there's much higher rental occupancy than homeowners. You're talking about, again, distressed neighborhoods, a higher people who participate in social welfare programs. Most of these folks simply don't have the money to put into a project that is going to qualify for this sort of a tax credit. So why bother, right? Then you read a little bit deeper into it. Okay, it's open to qualifying nonprofit organizations. And that is where this thing really starts to make sense. And I can sort of envision the plumbing of, again, this, what will prove to be a ton of bureaucratic waste. Okay. So when you're talking about nonprofit organizations, think about your local metropolitan housing association. Think about the CDCs, the community development corporations throughout the city of Cleveland. These are going to be nonprofit NGOs that basically provide housing and housing vouchers for people who rely and subsist on government welfare programs. Okay. And so what's going to happen then is these neighborhood associations will be granted monies that they will then receive these applications, filter them up through to the state and the neighborhood housing credit agency, who's going to review, and they're going to rubber stamp the ones that they like. And then it'll filter back down through the Metropolitan Housing Association. They will then go out to bid, or maybe even, who knows, have no bid contracts with their friends, but they're likely to go out to bid. And, the contractors who win these awards will be charging prevailing wages. They will be charging a ton of money for these projects because they can get away with it, because the oversight of this will be terrible, as it is in all government programs. And you're going to see lots of change orders. You're going to see things that drive the cost of these projects up. Okay. And so then ultimately what will happen is these metropolitan housing agencies, the CDCs and whatnot, who are really the ones doling out the money to those they deem eligible for these projects will be the ones who are getting the tax credits. So while it's open to homeowners, and some homeowners will benefit from this program, it's mostly going to benefit the Metropolitan Housing Associations. It's going to benefit the CDCs. It's definitely going to benefit the big contracting agencies who have the size and scope and wherewithal to deal with the mountain of paperwork that will have to be completed both by the state and the local Metropolitan Housing Association or authority. It's going to benefit those employees. It's going to create bureaucracy, which is going to suck up so much of that funding. The people who are now going to be employed to review these applications, and the people who are going to be employed and put man hours in at the local level with the MHAs and the CDCs are going to be the ones. That's where the jobs are going to be created. That their wages are going to gobble up so much of this money. It says, I believe I passed it, but this promises right here the potential to generate 500,000 homes over 10 years, $125 billion of total development activity, over 800,000 jobs in construction and construction-related industries, and $35 billion in federal, state, and local tax revenues. Okay, those are great projections. I'm sure the costs are going to be astronomical. The amount of money that large contracting companies will make, the amount of graft that is going to be pursued and done, especially when I think about these, multifamilies that are open to this, when I think about the housing co-ops that are eligible for this, right? That's a whole different, imagine a housing co-op is this. You have a little apartment, okay, but you have no, and you have to pay for this apartment like you would a home. Although you can't get a traditional mortgage, you have to get special financing, which costs more. And you get a little tiny apartment, 900 square feet or less is pretty common. And you don't own the unit you live in like you would in, say, a condominium. You own shares of the corporation that owns the building that your apartment is in, and your shares are basically in proportion to the square footage of your apartment within the larger building, right? So if your apartment is 3% of the whole building, well, you have a 3% equity stake in this housing co-op. That sounds kind of cool, except that usually the laws are written that make it very difficult to divest of your shares. It's very difficult to make decisions about renovations. There's a board. There's a board of directors in this corporation that has title to the co-op that gets to make all the decisions. They get to decide if and when you get to divest of the shares that you own. So it's a tricky thing. I think it's good if you plan on living in this place generationally. At any rate, I don't want to get into housing co-ops. They're a different sort of animal. Usually you only find them in urban areas. I believe in Cleveland area, there might be 3 or 4 in the entire greater Cleveland area. A few in Cleveland. I know there's one in Euclid. There may be more. But nevertheless, housing co-ops, qualified nonprofits, and then, the spattering of homeowners that can actually afford to build a house or substantially renovate a house, acquire land, environmental remediation. If you got the money to do all that stuff, it doesn't even make sense that you live there or need this or haven't done it already, right? So it's going to be these nonprofit organizations and these housing co-ops that really see and reap the big benefits of this. It's going to be, again, the contractors who reap the big benefits of this. And so then there will be people, of course, who end up in a new or newly remodeled home because of this. However, the next time the county goes to assess your property value, and a lot of us have just recently gone through this, and were staggered by the increase in property taxes that we had to pay after the last evaluation. Well, if you get your home substantially remodeled, or you purchase or get help getting into a new home or co-op or whatever, and the value goes up significantly, are these people who are in these distressed neighborhoods going to have the ability to afford the property taxes once they've been increased? You know, that's another thing. You can't sell your newly renovated home within the first 5 years. So for a lot of these folks, maybe the biggest benefit they could possibly have after the home is renovated is to sell this home, maybe use the proceeds to pay off debts, invest into something that makes more sense, et cetera, give them that sort of nest egg. They can really help to launch their family, but you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to you got to hope that in 5 years, the market's still healthy. Okay. And in the end, anybody, a lot of these homeowners who benefit, they don't end up at the end of this with any new skills, any greater income, any substantial change to their life, to their job, or anything that is going to really make a difference for them going forward. They just get into a house that may be unaffordable to them. Hopefully for most, it works. But the real benefits are going to be slim for the end user, for the actual citizen. And again, the primary benefits are going to go to the nonprofits, the bureaucracies created to do this program, and the large construction firms who are going to be hired to actually execute this construction. So again, another garbage bill that is being legislated by our government. And let's back up a little bit here too. March 2023, this thing's been here's the history of this. On March 6, 2023, this bill was drafted, read twice, and referred to the Committee on Finance. Okay. We're going back a year and a half. A week after that, or 6 days after that, on March 12th, 2020, I'm sorry, a year and a week after that, March 12th, 2024, the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs finally took a look at it. It took over a year after its introduction to have another committee, another bureaucracy within our federal government to even pay any attention to this at all. Meanwhile, home prices keep going up. Interest rates at this time, they recovered a little bit, but home prices kept going up. Affordability got worse and worse. The housing shortage didn't heal at all. And this bill's just been sitting there doing nothing. And those in government who are supposed to review this were not. And then April 16th of 2024 is the last time anybody paid any attention to this. The Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and then the Subcommittee on Housing, Transportation, and Community Development both held hearings on this. Nothing clearly came of these. Maybe the conclusion was, hey, we got an election coming up. Let's save this so that they can campaign on it, on this garbage that it is only going to make the rich richer and not really help. By the way, forgot to mention this. We're talking about a housing shortage and an affordability crisis that was created by this same federal government that's sitting on this garbage bill doing nothing. It was created, of course, by the economic reaction to the COVID pandemic, which, I've got my own opinion, but, I can't help but think that if it weren't for the media machine working overtime to scare the hell out of all of us about COVID, I don't know how many people would have actually noticed. I understand it's real. I had it. Okay. I understand people died from it, but for the amount of people that really passed, if it weren't for the constant media attention, how many of us really would have noticed that a global pandemic was underway? Let's be honest. Okay. And so we create a housing shortage, an affordability crisis that these politicians on both sides of the aisle, because this is a bipartisan bill, they intend to address with a tax credit that really is only going to benefit NGOs, nonprofits, and large construction companies. That's all I got for today, guys. I'm no government watchdog. Don't have time for it. But every once in a while, I like to look into stuff like this and read through these summaries and whatnot to try to understand more what they're talking about. Listen, as always, take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. I love you, people.